have to thank you because I feel so honored and so blessed that you would come onto this podcast and share your infinite wisdom and your
Thank you.
beautiful energy. So I'm going to kick it off by just like reminding everyone what the mission is behind the Birth New Earth podcast, which is to be able to remind humanity that we all have the ability to birth a new earth. Like we can roll up our sleeves and we can consciously create together the kind of world that we really all want to live in, right? But that takes us actually knowing what it is that we want, right? And
Right.
in order to know what we want, now we have to like do the dirty work of figuring out who we really are. Like what is our truth like for real? And then how do we actually live it? And that's why like I'm so beyond thrilled to have you here,
Thank
Christian
you.
Jones, because and I'm just going to start your reading your bio here because you're doing that, right? This is my beautiful brother who has done the work to uncover his
Still
truth,
doing the work.
uncover his truth and live his truth. And so you've transcended childhood trauma that has allowed you to self-heal your kidney disease, which we're totally going into. You have bravely traded in the corporate world when most people were still heads down in it for boldly living your authentic self. And so what that did for you in effect is that put you in the energy of manifesting this glorious life, right? So it's taken you from being a Broadway star, right, to a recording artist. And now you're giving back. You're uniting, you're uplifting communities, you're teaching others to live this way, specifically youths. So you're from Harlem originally. You credit your intro to the arts to the profound influence of your grandmother, which is so close to my heart because you know I am so close to my grandma too, who has passed. And what that's done for you is that's led you to grace many stages. I mean, it's unbelievable what you've accomplished. You've been in iconic productions such as Hair, Ain't Misbehaving. You have been Jesus Christ in Jesus Christ Superstar, which is so cool. And you know, we're going to talk about that too. You've been in Pearly. You've gone on to become, after that, a recording artist, a songwriter, a producer, and you've developed the Webby Award winning series Dog Park. Like, what haven't you done? Right. And then it goes further. So you're like, all right, now I'm going to turn around and help the world. So you've got this unbelievable commitment to community enrichment, right? So that's led you to collaborate with the NYPD, various nonprofits. You've mentored disadvantaged youths through new alternatives. You're teaching them life skills. You're offering guidance to homeless young people in New York City. And I've been with you giving back, which we'll also talk about. And that's why your energy is so beautiful and so palpable. And I'm so excited to welcome you here because you're driven by this belief in the power of individuality, which we all really need to start cultivating. Your mission is to inspire others to uncover their own unique gifts and to realize that nothing is impossible once you believe it isn't. So welcome, my friend. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. Like, just hearing, like you go through life and you start doing things and you never really pay attention to them until you're face to face with the reminder of those things. So it was it kind of took me there to hear those things because I haven't been on a stage in decades almost. But the thing is, it's like it's always a part of you, and I always feel proud of the accomplishments that I have done because with this hearing them, there were always things I wanted specifically to do. Like Hair was always my favorite show, always. So when the opportunity came to do it, I jumped on it, and it's one of those memories that you just have. That's like one of those profound memories that you know you wouldn't be who you are now had you not gone through those processes. So it was nice hearing them.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I feel like we all have to do this. Like at some point, we have to all like write down all the things that we've done, and like read them back to ourselves and be like, "Damn, we've done a lot of stuff." Because
Yeah,
every
I'm
time,
really something.
like, "Oh my God, well, look at me."
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I always realize that it's never what you did right that got you anywhere or made you who you were. It's what you learned from the things that you did wrong. So I really like to listen to people's stories and, find out what makes a person think the way that they did and what made them make the choices that they made. And then I kind of put myself into that context of, okay, that might have worked for them, but what is my path or what does my destiny entail? And that's one of the things I really try to help the young people do, that even in my neighborhood or with different organizations, is just realize that they are enough who they are. Like there's so many different forces around us that try and push us to go this way, or the one that really gets me is when they tell you about yourself. Like, and so it's like, so I just try to get the people around me to realize that it's okay to be who you are. Like everybody's got different eccentricities to their personality. It's just becoming aware of them and honing them in and making them work for you.
Yes.
That's gotten famous did it off of using the thing that they didn't do well to circumvent the thing that they did do well. I mean, so it's
Yes.
like, so it's
That's
just a
so
process of,
true. It's so powerful.
discovery.
But it's like people don't even realize, like, for you to become the person that's sitting here before me right now, to have gotten to this place, to have figured all this out, to be able to give back, your story is not an easy one. Like
Yeah.
when I first heard your story, and like I only first heard like the snippet of like your later teenage years,
Right.
which was extremely difficult. Like you had one really difficult year of death and transition there. And we'll go into that, but would you be open to beginning at the beginning with your mom and kind of talking about how that experience set you up to become the person that you are today, to be able to now understand that there was a growth from even the most painful moments in your life?
I have no problem, no problem sharing those things. Um, I am I'm the only child, and I grew up in a house with my dad, and my mom. And at first, I always kind of felt a disconnect from my
Mm.
mother. I mean, it was almost like I couldn't do anything right in her eyes, and there was always a tendency to acknowledge other things that other kids were doing. But even though like her own kid was on the honor roll, she never said anything. I mean, because it was just like, those sorts of things going on. So I just grew up with the understanding that I just knew where I sat with her. And then when she divorced my dad, I went with my dad, and my dad was a musician. So and when I was in my younger years, like 4 or 5, my grandmother came to live with us because my dad was, like I said, he was a musician. So he was always out and about and felt that there needed to be a more stable presence with me. So she moved in with us, which was one of the things that really changed my life because I didn't really have familiar maternal energy around me. It was just me and my
Mm.
dad for the first couple of years.
Right, right.
And what ultimately happened is I over time I got to realize why my mother and I just had that disconnection. And it was something that I'd heard about, but I wasn't completely sure of what it was. When I was in development with my parents, I came at an unlikely time. So you can say I was an oops baby.
Oh, I mean, when you say in development, that means when she was pregnant with you.
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone say it like that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I was an oops baby. So she had plans that she wanted to accomplish in her life and things that she envisioned for herself, and I kind of stopped that process. So she was going
Wow.
through the developmental stages with on her mind how I came at an unlikely time and how she didn't really feel like it was the best time for her to have a baby. So all of those emotions transferred themselves into that little embryo that was developing inside of her. So I never felt that connection, and that was because there really wasn't one.
From the get-go, like
Yeah,
from in utero, you're saying.
yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
So as I got older, I always felt like that there was a disconnect, and I was talking to her this was a while ago, and I told her that did the same thing, and I was explaining to her like I said I told you when I was a kid that I felt like you didn't love me, and I remember telling her that I was like 7 or 8 or something, and she laughed it off, and I was like, no, I was serious.
Yeah, you're like, this is actually not a joke. This is the most like traumatic moment
Well,
of my
yeah,
life.
I was like, seriously.
Yeah.
And so we kind of we would communicate every now and then, but for the most part, I don't like drama when it's like a connection like family. So, and plus I have a very small family. So it became more of a family that I developed situation. And so my dad and my grandmother lived here, and my grandmother stepped in, and she's Haitian. And so I was Haitian, and she's probably still Haitian. Even though she
She did
passed.
change that.
It does, she passed. And her influence has been a profound thing that pretty much set my tone and my trajectory
Mm.
for life. A lot of my confidence or things that the way I go about things or little they call them criticisms, quotes that I would throw out there and say or whatnot have been things that have been given to me by my grandmother. So I hold all of those things really close, and she pops up every now and then when there's a very a critical decision or something I have to really consider or take seriously. She pops up and just gives me like a little reminder, a little guidance, and says, remember da 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 da, and then immediately I go to what she told me, and I'll take that approach, and it usually works. And so then going through with my dad being a musician, my grandmother being Haitian, I kind of had this idealism that that uniqueness was cool, that it was okay to be who you were, and that everybody has something to offer. And so I grew up with that mentality, but reality told me otherwise, because I started dealing with people outside of the house, and they had different perspective. They were the ones who were saying, you can't do this, people can't do that. These people do this, these people do that. And then I started realizing that how I was raised was a little different than what was normal to people in my neighborhood. So that was kind of a learning curve, and just realizing that people come from a place of hurt, and some people come from a place of experience, and some people come from a place of no experience. And we're all put on this earth to coexist and learn from each other. And sometimes that comes from the things that are vastly different from you. They were put into your path for you to learn something and for them to learn something. So instead of trying to be specific with why I don't get along with this person, why I don't like that person, just try to figure out who they are. Because underneath, we have way more things in common than we have different. So, it just becomes a process of trying to find out what those things are and develop a starting point. And then as time would unveil itself, I started finding out more and more that that's the divine plan. That's why we're all on this earth together. And I'm reintroduced more and more to the reasons why that I hold that belief. And that's been one of the things that has helped me get through life, and it's helped me form connections with people professionally and personally. It's allowed me to think outside the box and be able to relate to other people who think outside the box, and sometimes realize that there is no box.
Right.
I mean, it's like there's so many different approaches to things in life that I think is very, very, it's very important that those different sects of people or those different groups of people have an outlet and a vessel and a person to communicate with them. I don't think anybody should be ignored. That's like, I was told that that's the worst thing you can ever do to somebody is ignore them. And so I always try to make sure that I at least give a little bit of time to just letting the person be themselves and treat people the way that you want to be treated, the golden rule. And so those were a lot of the things that I went through in my life. And then when I got to high school, my grandmother and my dad both passed the same year. My dad was murdered and my grandmother passed away. And so in the same year, I started college. And like I said, it was my senior year of high school. So it was a process of cleaning out the apartment that I grew up.
Wow. I didn't know that your dad was murdered. I'm so sorry.
It was one of those things where so much was going on that I didn't stop to sit in it. And then over time, I realized that was why they were so adamant in making sure I knew this and that I was aware of that, because deep down, their soul was aware of the fact that they weren't going to be around for my adult years. So they made sure that I had all the tools that I needed. And sometimes I ignored them. Sometimes I went with the opposite direction as opposed to what I knew I should have been doing. But it always came to pass that, what they told me was what I should have listened to. And so that's the thing that gets me through. I don't get depressed, or I don't really get upset, and I don't bunker into the corner and boo-hoo, because I look at it like I was lucky. I was really fortunate that I had, in my particular age group and that particular era, there weren't too many single dads with just their son in the hood. I mean, it was just like, so that was different. And my grandmother was always the one that was telling me that, just do you, because nobody else can do that.
Right.
And so like, I just grew up with that. And I started realizing that I even though I didn't have my familiar ties with me, I was rich in the fact that I had people who invested in me and who told me and made sure that I knew I was capable of anything. So by the time I got to college, I went from Harlem, from high school to NYU, which was a big difference at the time.
Huge difference. With all of a sudden, like, no family on this earthly plane.
Nope. I had friends that I knew from school, but we didn't go to the same colleges. And at that particular time, life south of 96th Street and life north of 96th Street were two different things.
Right, different worlds.
Exactly.
Yes, but back then, I don't know if people like know or remember that, that like know the Harlem of now. It was not the same.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was a learning curve because I was surrounded by people who had particularly in musical theater, I was surrounded by people who had a belief that there was a certain way of going about things in the theater community. And that is, if the actors of color, you go out for the roles for the actors of color. And everybody else, you have this playing field to go through. And that was kind of like the way of looking at things for a long time. And
I still I'm sorry to interrupt, but like when you told me that, I was like, wait, what? Like, what? Like, we're like in that life still? Like, I can't. So it's like, how many roles are that? That's not a lot of roles.
Yeah.
Like, I could be like two things. Like, that's it.
And they call it the Chitlin circuit.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and seriously, and chitlins are awful. So I'm like, that makes it really bad. Yeah. And so and that was kind of at odds with the world that I was painting, that my parents painted for me, was that you could do anything you wanted to. And so I had people sitting here next to me and sitting on the other side of me telling me, no, don't audition for that show because they're gonna give it to the white kids. And so I'm just sitting there like, my parents told me that if people like you, they'll find a spot for you. And so everybody was like, yeah, right. And just like
your parents don't know anything.
And you
go home now.
I got so huffy. But the thing is, it's like I had to check myself, because if I looked at things the way that they looked at things, they would have been right. Because they only saw it being gone about that way. And so that's the thing about it. I was like, I can't get upset with them because we haven't seen it. I technically hadn't seen it, but I was like, that doesn't mean it's impossible. And what ultimately ended up happening is that's what happened for me. I had auditioned for the show Hair, and initially I didn't make it. And I was really upset because, it was when I saw the auditions coming, I was all prepared. And my good friend Deandra, she auditioned with me, and she got in. And I was so upset, and I didn't show it though. And then later, rehearsal started, and one of the guys who had auditioned for one of the characters, it was a white character, because Hair has it's 5 principals, 2 of which are of color. And one of the themes is one of the women is pregnant by either the black guy or the white guy. It's like one of the
coming back to me now.
And the black guy's character had already been casted, so they didn't have any other roles open. And so when one of the guys dropped out, who was originally playing one of the white characters, they called me and asked me to play it. So it was one of the few times where both characters in this arc, the trilogy with the white girl and the white guy and the black guy, it was the first time it was her and 2 black guys.
Wow.
And
so right then you're already making some kind of a shift.
Yep. And the first thing I did was I told my friends, I was like, see, it happens. It was just the director remembered me from the audition. So that was like real life, seeing in front of me that those things happen. And just going into my adult life, I saw it happen more and more. But that was like the first time where I was like, there was something to what my dad said and what my grandmother said. And that just set a tone for the way I went about things from then on.
That's absolutely incredible. Like, did you then feel that there was power in belief, and that if you stayed core in that was meaningful? Because I feel like so few people know that so early on, and that you had these really difficult lessons, but yet you caught on so quickly.
You're right. It was because if you stay who you are, it inevitably things will come around to you because you are who you always were. But it's when you start changing who you are to fit into these boxes. It might be a temporary replacement, but essentially you've been placed into that role for being someone else. And that's when it turns into a whole nother thing. My sun sign is an Aquarius, of course. And one of the things that a lot of my fellow Aquarians and I look at and find kind of interesting is that Aquarians tend to become successful at something that they did anyway. Like it was just something that they just did, and they just excelled at it, and they just made it through. Like Jackie Robinson, first Black Major League Baseball player. It wouldn't have happened had he not been good.
Amazing, amazing. It's such a lesson though, because so many of our generation have been taught just, and we talked about this kind of like before we hit record, to kind of like contort yourself into a box, even if you're not happy with like the version of yourself that's showing up, just to be able to have people to say, that they would say yes to giving you, this thing that you think you need for survival. And then, how many folks are waking up now, like in like middle age, we'll call it, even though I really don't feel like I'm middle age, and you certainly don't look like you're middle age. And they're like, damn, I am miserable. Like I have been doing this thing that really hasn't been my truth for the bulk of my life. And now we're at the point where so many people, like, they know that, but they don't even know like what it is that they're supposed to do. Because when you ask them, well, what do you love? And who's your truth? Like, who are you really? They're like, well, damn, like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't like I wasn't schooled like that. I didn't have like a grandma and a dad who were like, you do you. And I'm the same. And then even when you get to the point, and this is where I think your story is so powerful, of like figuring out who you are, right? And now you finally figured out what you love, like it took me years to figure that out. How many of us are even brave enough or courageous enough to then be it? Because we're so afraid of failure. We're so steeped in what other people will think still, right? And so you transcended that so early on. Like you were casted as a Black Jesus. Like talk to me about that.
That was an interesting situation in itself, because at the time I was a heavy cigarette smoker. And
I didn't think you were going to say that.
Like, yeah, and the woman who played Mary and the guy who played Judas, we were the only smokers in the cast, and so during intermissions we'd be like out in the back smoking. So people would go around the back to smoke as the audience, and they would see Jesus, Mary, and Judas back there smoking. So that was kind of funny. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That was one of those things where it was kind of like a setup, not set up in a negative way. I mean, it's a setup in the fact that things staircase into something else, so you can come to a different realization. And when I had gotten to Jesus Christ Superstar, it was one of those pivotal moments where you got to put yourself in the position of somebody who had been tortured, who had been misunderstood, who had been physically attacked, who had been just gone through all these things because they knew that they had a purpose and they knew that they had a message that they wanted everybody to have. So to sit into that,
that's a perfect role for you.
Yeah, like, so every day you sit into the, I would sit in the dressing room knowing that this performance, I have to like really embody all of this. And it was very emotionally exhausting. I will have to say that. And I had to come into two fears doing that show that I walked out of saying, okay, I'm a better person. I have a fear of crowds being all in your face. And there's a scene where they're like, oh, touch my eyes, I cannot see, that whole part. And so the whole cast is doing this in my face all night. So that was kind of
you're like, thought?
Oh yeah, so that was kind of freaky. And then the other part is to go through the crucifixion was always really hard, because it's not something you can just like prepare yourself for. It's something that, like, as the show progresses and you physically go through all of these things in front of the audience, you emotionally go through all of these things yourself. And so by the time it's at the end, it was really, I mean, I was so tired every night that we did it. I just would not stick around. I would just come off the cross and I would just go right to the dressing room and then go home. But that was when I realized that I need to do something else. I enjoyed theater and I enjoyed performing, but I knew that there was some, because with that emotion that was that rose up inside of me, I knew that I had to take that same emotion and apply it somewhere else. And I knew I couldn't just relegate that strictly to the stage and doing theater. And so that was one of the things that got me to the point where I said, that is the perfect show to go out of here on. that would be my last show. And it has been. Because I said, I'm ready for the next stage. And that was the interesting period where I started telling myself, this is where people go wrong. This is where I went wrong. Mm-hmm. Started telling myself something was wrong with my life. And then I went to DC to have a normal life where I can work a job and have the dinner parties and to have a set stable of friends that, are upwardly mobile people too. And so I thought that was what I needed. So I went down there, and a friend of mine had an agency that did placement, and she got me a job working with the Department of Health and Human Services. And I was executive assistant to a gentleman that was the senior science advisor to Secretary Leavitt at the time. And so when we were placed there, that was an interesting dynamic in itself, because he was like 90 and I was like 30 with dreadlocks.
Yeah, coming off of like Jesus Christ Superstar, like
we got along totally fine. Everybody looked. We totally did. There was like one time where I made friends with the guys who worked in the garage, who would arrange the vehicles to transport the executives to Bethesda or to different meetings that they had. And so I made friends with them, and most of them spoke Spanish, and most of them lived in Columbia Heights, where I live. So I would go in there and smoke. And whenever Dr. Rob needed a car, who was my employer at the time, I would just call them. And so he always got cars really fast. And one day, he heard me talking to them in the garage, and I was like, Dr. Rob need a whip like really quick, because we got to get him to his meeting, dude. And Dr. Rob came down the hall, and he was like, what did you just say? What was that? And I was like, oh, whip, that's urban vernacular for your car. And he said, oh, okay. And so he went to the bathroom and came out, and he was like, so is my whip ready? I mean, so like we just totally got along really well. But
you're like, dude is cool. Like,
I loved him. But then I started, the more I was in DC, the more I realized that this wasn't really my place. I didn't have a creative outlet. Everybody was so focused on what level they need to get to in order to retire.
Right.
I mean, it was just like the energy just wasn't there. And I went to a karaoke bar, and I was singing with some friends. And then one of the women who was the host asked me, she said, why are you here? And I was like, what do you mean? She was saying that that I had a lot of energy and I could have been anywhere. What made me decide to settle in DC? Because DC is not really the biggest place for creatives. So
it's like the opposite.
It is. It's the complete opposite.
It's so wild. Like when you first told me this story in the prep call, I was like, did he say DC? Like,
yeah. I sat there, and I sat there the entire night after she told me that. Wow. And I said, maybe she's right. And then I kind of got burned by some friends down there, but that's different. So I came back. I said, I'm going back to New York, but this time I'm going to take every idea that I've ever had or any creative inclinations that I come up with, and I'm going to find a way to make them work for me. And so I packed up my 2 dogs and I came back here with nothing. Like it was just, I rented a limo to drive me from DC to here.
Oh, look, you're like, I'm looking back in style. Like, I'm serious.
Yeah. I had no idea where I was going when I came back. I didn't tell my friends I was coming back. I just said, I'm just going back to New York. And so I rented an apartment, and I went off of Craigslist and found one. And the person showed me the apartment, and I moved my stuff in. About 3 days later, somebody opened the door, and I found out that the apartment had been evicted, and that the person who was staying there took the money from me and let me stay in there and didn't tell me anything. Yeah. And so that was kind of strike number one. And then I went to Starbucks across the street, and I sat there, and I was telling a friend of mine how everything was going wrong, but I was saying how I'm not going to let it get to me. I'm not going to let it bother me. And lo and behold, a lady named Lila, I have to make sure that she sees this when we finish. Her name was Lila, and she was sitting in Starbucks at the next table, heard everything that I was saying. And she said that she has an apartment in the Upper West Side that is open because she lives with her boyfriend in Soho. She did not know me. She told me I could take I get emotional talking about this. She told me I could take my dogs and I could stay in that apartment until I got ready. And I was just sitting there just like, are you serious?
Right.
And I was like,
never happens in New York.
Yep. Yep. And so I stayed there and paid her every penny for staying there, mind you. But just the fact that, like, if I hadn't been my authentic self and I hadn't just gone one foot in front of the other and went off of blind faith and just knowing that what I want to get done and what I'm going to get done, it's going to take a moment, but I'm going to have to go through some ugliness. You don't have the test without the you don't have the testimony without the test. So I knew that there was other things that were going to get in the way that were going to challenge me to see how badly I wanted what I said I wanted. I don't look at them as things that stop you. I just look at it as things that make you question how badly do you want it, because otherwise it'll continue. And her doing that opened the door for, and she lived on the same block that my grandmother moved to when we moved the first time. I mean, it was just so many. It was like so many things.
I was gonna say like this is why like I so love interviewing you because like in the prep call like it was so obvious that like your angels, right, who came and taught you and then left this earthly plane have been with you the entire time and have planted people all along the way. Like you're just getting started with telling these stories, but it's like the karaoke person. It was like this, this woman who got this apartment. Like every story is so synchronistic to show that you've been divinely guided the entire time. You've never been alone, and it's because you've been in that energy that you're talking about.
Exactly. Exactly, because like I wouldn't have been able to do anything by myself. I mean, I would have tried, and I would have made some effort. I would have made some leeway. But when you have that celestial investment, that there's a power that's bigger than you are, that has an idea of who you are before you know who you are. And the universe never wants to. It never invokes any ill will. The universe wants to work with you.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it's just that people get in their own way,
right?
And sometimes people don't let those processes happen, and that's when you stifle your creativity and you mute your growth. But just opening yourself up to being aware that things are going to happen. It's not what happens that's the issue; it's how you react to it that's the issue. Right. And so that was where the questions came. And with Lila, she let me stay at her apartment. I went through all my processes with her. I went to Washington Square Park, which was not too far from. It was a train ride away, but it was near the vet that I would take the dogs to. And I would sit there, and I was looking around, and I realized that people get along inside the dog runs, even if they wouldn't outside of it. Like people, their pets are the things that get them to communicate. And so I was thinking to myself, what if there was a show or some sort of project where people could take their pets and do something that betters the neighborhood and their pets themselves and just overall bring some good vibes. And so I decided what if there was a reality show that was like that? So I went to the Performing Arts Library. I got a book on treatment writing. And I just followed what the book said. I just ticked all the boxes. It said, if you can find a production company that does similar productions as your idea, try it and pitch it to them. I was watching Doggy Moms on New York One about these women in New York and their little dogs. And so I wait till the credits rolled to see who the production company was. And I saw who it was. And then I contacted them and just called them blindly on the phone.
That's amazing.
I have an idea.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I have an idea. This is what it is. It might work. I don't know. And so they called me in. And so I had to storyboard it and explain to them the whole series and what it all entailed. And they ended up picking it up. And so they developed it, and then they sent it to 4 different outlets. They sent it to Discovery Communications, which Animal Planet is under. They sent it to National Geographic and a couple of other ones. The Animal Planet picked it up. And it became a series. And so like that was, and then the Yahoo has the Webbies, which is like the version of the Emmys, I guess. And it won Best Reality Show. And so like there was like a series, it was like a whole lot of different things that took place. But that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I might be able to do this.
Yes, I can maybe manifest.
Yeah, I was like, this is.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so things like that have unfurled themselves. And I look back at all of them, and I'm proud of them, but the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that I didn't necessarily believe that I could do it. I just never told myself I couldn't. So that was like the big difference. And so now it's just sitting in a place of creativity where I can choose what I want to do. And unfortunately, people have always said that it's really hard to sustain a living in the arts in New York City. And I'm like, not really. It's like you can.
Right.
You just have to be smart about it.
Right. It's hard when you say it's hard.
Right. Exactly. So like, and I'm very blessed and comfortable, knock on wood, that I can sustain myself and live in New York and express myself creatively and be able to invest myself in the things that I really enjoy doing and have an outlet where I can do social good at the same time, because I have to have my two. I have to have something that feeds my creativity and something that feeds my humanity. And so like, that balance took a while to get there, but now that I can comfortably sit there and say, okay, I enjoy what I'm doing in my life and I enjoy how I feel in my life and where I'm sitting. To me, that's like, that was the goal to me. It's just be happy and to make other people around me happy. So it took me a while to get there. But once I got there, I knew that I couldn't just let it be all about me.
Right. Right.
It wasn't from birth all the way up until now. And so I'm like, I have to make sure that I can offer something from what I've learned, from what I've experienced, or even learn new experiences with new people. And so I just opened myself up, and it got me to where I am now, which is I have an awesome group of friends around me. And they're all like-minded in the same way, where it's more of a, how can we better the community and how can we advance things forward and not be so self-absorbed now. And it just, I wouldn't appreciate them as much had I not gone through the instances I went through in DC with people, or the understanding what it's like to have that disconnection from your mother, to find compassion with other people. So it's like, it was just a all around, it was what they call it, the coming to Jesus moment.
Yes. Yes. And that's what blows my mind the most, because like no one had ever broken it down to me. Like I'm familiar with how, the mind is connected to the body, how disease can occur just based upon a belief system that we have. But no one had ever explained to me how you can even have a kidney be affected just based upon, feeling as though, there was a part of you that needed to hold on to things that would have even been toxic for you, just because you were still looking for that maternal role. Like, would you be able to go into that? Because I think the healing that happened from that is really one of the most inspirational mind-body healing stories that I've ever heard. I've already shared it on social media like a month or so ago, and I'm certainly going to share it again. And this time, definitely tagging you now that I know that I can use your name. Because I don't think people understand how empowered we can be to self-heal when we do peel back those layers of getting back to what it is that formed those initial limiting beliefs that we carried through our life in our body.
Exactly. I didn't know it was possible.
Right.
I just knew that I had gotten the diagnosis as having chronic kidney disease.
Wow. And how old were you?
This was when I was like, this was like 99, 2000, I think.
So you're a kid still.
And I had to have a kidney taken out because of it.
Wow.
And so I only have one sole kidney. And so there was, and then coming into realization with what role the kidney actually plays. And the kidney's role is to detoxify your body and get rid of the things that your body doesn't need. So it made sense upon later reflection that because I had held on to things because of how my life, how I was raised with my mother and that whole issue, I kind of held on to that. And things manifest themselves physically once they've been developed emotionally. Like that's all an ulcer is.
Right.
So it's and so I didn't realize all of that until much later. And then there was a period when it started getting really bad. I mean, I was turning gray. I mean, it was like really bad. And I had just started going to Meaningful Conversations. It's a group here in New York that, it's not just necessarily New York, it's all over the world. It's part of the Baha'i faith. And they're part of
the Baha'i, you said?
Yes, Baha'i. The element I'm speaking of, Meaningful Conversations, it was a weekly conversation that was hosted by them for people in the community to talk about things that were relative and important to the society and the community as a whole. Mm-hmm. So about how to progress forward and how to be innovative thinkers and building a new humanity where everyone is, their contribution is valued. And so I just started going to the Meaningful Conversations meetings, and there was a married couple there that had mentioned to me that there were devotionals, which were it was a little bit more specific, where it was an environment that was conducive to worship and to praise and to acknowledge your higher power, whoever your higher power may be, or whatever you choose to call them. Let me put it that way. And where those like minds could come together in celebratory engagement. And so they were telling me, they were the first couple that I told that my kidney was failing and that I was having some issues. And so they mentioned to me, well, there's a book study for one of our books that it might help you because it's talking about the life and the spirit. And so I said, okay, sure. And so I joined the group. It was meeting on Tuesdays at the time, and I joined the group after it had already started. And it was facilitated by my good sis Maria. Hey Maria, I know she's gonna be watching. And her husband Jeremy. And so we would just go through the processes of each chapter, and it laid out ways of being introduced to an innovative way of thinking and how to realize that just like our bodies are interconnected, so are we spiritually and to each other. And it opened my eyes to a lot of different approaches and things that I had conceptually understood, but I just didn't see how it translate into other elements of my life.
Right.
And so we were on this was right during COVID, mind you. So we were doing it online. And
like everything all at once, like all the things.
Yeah. So I had all this news, but I had to hold it to myself where I was like getting sick or whatnot. And
wow.
One day, and we just opened it up and we were just talking about things personally. And so I shared what was going on with me in the group. And they helped me follow through some of the tutelage that was in the book of how to come to those realizations and strip those layers back and just know that everybody has a purpose in this life, including you. And the challenge for a lot of people is finding out what that purpose is. And the best way to find it is to look outside of yourself. And that'll be the best way to introduce you to yourself. And lo and behold, I started really sticking with that and, just adapting more positive mindset and keeping positive people around. And slowly but surely, I left out one other part. My good sis Anna, I know Anna's going to be watching.
Yeah, like he's got to bring up Anna. He's got to bring up Anna. I'm interviewing her next, by the way.
Oh, yeah, she told me. Anna told me about this herb in Mali called kiriba. I think I said it right. She'll tell me if I didn't. And it's a herb that's it's relatively common in their area where people use it for its medicinal benefits and its physical benefits. And so she took me to little Senegal on 116 and got me a couple bags and was like, you better drink this.
Is there? I didn't know there was a little Senegal.
116. 116 between Malcolm X and I want to say Adam Powell. And so she took me over there, got me some of it. She said, you drink it like tea. And she let you steep it and you don't put any sugar or anything in it. And you just make sure you drink it. Now she said, you better make sure you drink it. And so I was like, okay. And so between that and hanging out with them and then adapting these new processes, my renal functions completely increased. And so it was an astronomical increase. It was noticeable where I would go and get my blood work for my panel done. And they noticed it. And they were like, okay, what is going on? And so I explained to them that my friend Anna gave me this herb and I started, getting a lot more centered and understanding what my purpose was. And so I just have become a lot more purpose driven. Wow. And so they're still in the process of doing the medicinal trials on this drug that my friend Anna gave them. They've been doing that for like the last 2 years, probably 3 years now. They're just trying to really look into the benefits of it because no one had ever heard of it.
So they were like, can you bring this herb in? Because
I have to take some. I have to take a bag. And they started doing a clinical trial on not with the general public, but just to discover, get a couple of guinea pigs and then just have them do this.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy to hear. But was it then that you realized the emotional tie to your mom and the kidney? Like, how did that come about? Because I feel like that was the catharsis moment, but like, did you have to have that first to have the feeling or?
It was during one of the Zoom calls. One of the women who was a participant in the group, her name was Suzanne. She had issues with her mother, and so she just asked me, just outright blank. She was like, "What made her act that way? Have you ever had the conversation with her that why did she treat you like that?" And at that point, I hadn't, and so I was sitting there, and I was like, "I don't know why she was like that." And so my mother had gotten COVID. And so I went to visit her and I had that conversation with her where I was like, what was the beef? Like, what was all that about?
Right.
And that was how I found out that she had plans that she wanted to do, that she had goals that she had set for herself that I put on pause when I came along. And so she kind of had some deep-seated resentment in the fact that she sat back and watched me do everything I wanted to do,
Right.
but she hadn't gotten her taste of what she wanted to do because she had a child. And that was, and it brought everything to center. I was like, okay, that's what it makes sense. So I started looking more into it. And that's a common thing. And a lot of times that's what the postpartum, that's
Right.
what it is.
That's what it
And
is.
so I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I had heard of it, but I didn't know that. And it made me more empathetic and sympathetic for my mother because like I mean, I'll never give birth to a child, but I understand how that tie, it couldn't have been easy to
Right.
go through 9 months
Right.
of developing something and
Yeah.
someone, and just to be able to look at it after you've given birth to it and just not feel anything. That
Right.
that had to be it had to be confusing for her. So that put me in a place of understanding, being a lot more sympathetic. I
Mhm.
also knew that you can't go back and undo the past.
Yeah.
But what you can do is create a new future and a new present. So we're not the best of friends, but
Yeah.
we understand that we have our own separate paths in life. And she understands that I might not have family on that side, but I have a family still.
Yeah.
And I have people around me who are encouraging, and we sit and we talk and we laugh and we pick at each other and
That's
and
family.
oh, all right.
Yeah, that's our family. Yeah.
And
Wow.
you've met everybody.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the catalysts in help healing those scars and just
Yeah.
creating new paths and forging new futures. And people have taken notice of that. There's been times where people have just outright asked us, "How do we know each other?" Because if you look at if you look at everyone's background, we're all completely different age
Right.
backgrounds and whatnot, but we always have the best of times together. And I think that that's one of the things that sometimes the community or other people might learn how to be better friends or how to be better neighbors to each other, not necessarily by what somebody told them, but by looking and seeing that there's groups of people out there who find actual consistencies in their personalities and the way that they think and just go about life, where they have these similarities that we might not visibly see, but they've taken the time to get to know each other and taken all those external things out of it
Right.
and just got to
Right.
know each other as a spirit and as a soul.
Yeah.
And that's something people can learn from just by seeing that.
Oh
So
yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's one of the resolves from that. And as it stands now, my kidney functions are completely stable. I don't do any what was the radio what that radio not dialysis dialysis. I
Yeah,
don't have
dialysis.
I don't have
That's
to do
just
any of that.
amazing. You
Mhm.
you had explained so like it sounds like you no longer personalized what was happening
Right.
with your mom because you were able to have empathy for her, right? And so was the kind of like the energetic disconnect that was happening in your kidney, like when you were personalizing it,
Right.
like was there then a buildup of toxicity then in the kidney because of that? Because
Yep.
you were like can you go into that? Because
Well,
when you
uh,
explained that blew my mind. I had never heard that before, and then it made so much sense after, and it's changed a lot of the way that I think.
Yeah, like we hold a lot of energy in our bodies, and some people are aware of that. You well know that, and like it's just a simple fact of an example is when someone cuts their hair, how they feel so different because we hold so much
Mm.
energy in our hair that
Yes.
negative energy has been removed from them, and so now they just feel a new starting place. So and also, but it's a little bit more than just cutting your hair. You literally took a lot of the negative energy physically off of you. And so with your body parts play that same role. My grandmother explained this process to me that there's a common West Indian belief, and that is that what you experience in your life replicates itself in your body.
Mm.
So if you have a bad back, you're probably carrying a lot of unnecessary burden.
Right.
Or if you have a like that little crick you might get in your neck, um, he always said that that's a clear sign that there's something going on in your life that you need to avert your attention to, that you're clearly forcing yourself not to.
Right.
And so,
Wow.
so it creates this tension in your body. And so and this was, I remember her telling me that years after I got the chronic kidney diagnosis. Didn't put the two and two together though.
Right. Took time.
No, and then it took me life and the experiences and a couple of years before I realized that was really the thing. And so taking all of that into consideration and just realizing, you know what, I have to make sure that my emotional development and my physical development are in sync, because that's when you start realizing that a lot of depression take years off a person's life.
Yeah.
Like people and those sorts of things. I was even reading that there was a medical review that I had read a couple years ago that was saying how positive energy is it's not solely a choice. A lot of it you're born with. Like you can be born with a positive gene, or if you and I was like, really? And it was just laying out how there's certain cultures that don't have the same distractions that we do, that live so much longer and have such stable lives, and it's because they're stress free. They have community. They don't put value on things like wealth. They have a positive outlook because they have a social life. I mean, but they might not have internet, but like.
Right. That's probably why they have all the other things.
I would let the internet go if I could have all the other ones. And so, and physically, they don't have the hospitals. They'll have like one community person who's in touch with the earth, who understands the benefits to each one of the herbs or plants that's in the area. And they go through processes where they process things in ceremonies. And that's one of the reasons why they live so long. And so I was sitting there, I was like, as much as I've watched National Geographic, I've never figured that out.
Right. No one's ever showed that.
No one's ever seen it. And so just seeing it firsthand and just realizing that, okay, there's some validity to that. It just proved to me that we have more control over our own experiences and our destiny than we think. A lot of people just say, it's up to chance, or that we don't have any involvement in it. Oh, yes, we do. We have tons of investment in it. By making the decisions that we make and what we feed ourselves with, not just physically, but just environmentally. I don't let a lot of negative energy hang on to me. I'll just move. I'll just get out the room. And I always tell people that's one of the reasons why I feel so much younger, is because as much tragedy and trauma as I've been around, I always realized that, like, I can't sit in that place. I can let that thing be, I can hold a positive reminder to it. But I can't let that be the limit of my experiences, because if I just sit at all the things that have gone wrong, I would never be able to get over those in order to see what's going to go right.
Right.
So it's a lot of it is just taking some time to bunker down. I'm a busy person. I have a lot of energy, but I have to give myself a couple beats, just go home and just sit down with my dogs and not do anything.
Right.
Because you can't be good for anybody else if you're not good for yourself. And just taking that time to recharge myself gives me more energy to go out and be a positive beacon to other people. Because to me, that's what it's come down to now, is how can I be a catalyst in making things a lot more positive for other people. And even with Harlem being so gentrified now, there's not just necessarily now, but in the last couple of years, there's a lot more racial commingling here, where some people are open to it and some people are resistant to it. I'm open to it. I think anybody has something to offer. And so my role is to try and get Group A and Group B to realize that, you know what, you're not the enemy. and that's what the project with the New York Police Department is. It's about breaking bread, building bonds. And essentially what it does is it's a benefit that it's a provision that Mayor Adams developed, where it takes a couple of community people who in turn find other community people and bring them together in one room for dinner. And
I love that.
I love to eat. And so, so it brings the two sides together, and the ideal is to get different races and backgrounds or whatnot, and just talk about the things that affect them in that neighborhood, and then come up with conscious plans in order to continue that movement. A lot of times it'll just be one thing that just boom, this is the event. We're just going to get together and just talk for 2 hours. No, this one is to come up with a cohesive plan and how we can build something that lasts longer than we do and changes the demographic of the neighborhood. So I've been doing that with them at different sections of the city. And I've actually seen some of the return of it, because there was one particular area in particular. It was an older woman who had been in the neighborhood forever, and then it was a lesbian couple who were like 20 who had just moved in the area. Both groups didn't. Both parties knew nothing about each other. They were, in their mind, that is the opposite of what I want around me.
Right.
So I had both of them in the group, and then had them come to realization that they were both into gardening. They were both they both had they were both a Ramnishel gypsy. I had a Ramnishel gypsy in their family. They both had they were both obsessed with cooking shows. They were both. I mean, they just found so many commonalities. And so they developed a supper club in their area where
oh my God.
yeah, like the three of them. And so I was sitting there just like, oh. And they decided to get other people in the neighborhood to just come together and have dinner and share recipes and that sort of thing. And it just touched my heart because I was like, okay, these women would have never met had that not happened before. Just seeing things like that really happen. It's like, okay, we can make an impact and we can move things forward and create a society that we all want to be in. But, there's going to be challenges along the way. And it's not necessarily about how you let it stop you, but how you change it into something that I can accomplish. Like, instead of looking at it as something that holds me back, I just look at it as something that questions how badly you want it.
Yes, I'm so glad you shared that. Like, we have to put the link to that in the description.
I will.
Because that is one of the most profound movements that I've heard about in the city, and that you're a part of it. It's so meaningful because everyone always forgets that, like, we're all human. Like, we're all people. We all came from the same place. We're going back to the same place. And if we can remember that while we're here, that's the name of the game. And we can have that sense of unity and joy. And the way to do that, you just said it so beautifully, is through finding our common thread. And I think, like, we've had so much generational trauma. Like, so many people have come from so many different kinds of generational trauma that the way that we're showing up is just, we're carrying all of that angst with us, right? And we think that no one on the other side of the street, like, understands that. And we don't even bother sometimes to even look up and make eye contact because of that. And if we could start having these meals where we share commonality and we start to tell the stories of where we've all come from, it's like what you had said before, like, everyone has this kind of difficulty, this kind of trauma, but it's all just to get us back to our soul. That is the thing, like, that really unifies us most. And to start getting real about those kinds of stories. Like, I remember I was on a call with you guys, and it's kind of like uncomfortable to bring up, but I'm going to bring it up because, I like to talk about uncomfortable things. How, like, I'm like, in this, here she goes, like, very super, like, white, 99% Italian neighborhood on the southern tip of Staten Island. And people are like, oh, she's in Fontenball. Okay. I am not Italian, but, like, I just, like, for the most part fit right in, even though I'm like kind of like that weird spiritual person. And I would say, how when I walk on the street, if someone who is Black on my street, like, I say hi to everyone when I walk my dog, but like, everyone says hi back to me unless you're Black, right? And I would be like, I don't understand. Like, what have I done wrong? Like, what the like, I'm like Whitey McWhite, like, not getting it. And then you broke it down for me, like, kind of explaining that, like, people are almost just like, like, they're set up to be like, why is she doing that? Like, there's something wrong with her. Like, and when I started to realize that actually the issue was not with everyone else, but it was just my energy, because I was actually almost just like setting up people who are Black to not say hello to me because I already thought that they weren't going.
Yep.
From that call forward, everyone who was Black in my neighborhood said hi to me going forward.
Yeah, it's the intent, like
It's me.
the behind it. Yep. Yep. That's the conversation that we've had. That's the conversation I've had with like there would be at one of the meetings there would be a couple of people who I live right on the corner from the subway station, and I walk my dogs in the area, so I see people all day, and I'll see them all night too. And there were a couple of white people who would get off the train and immediately just run home. It could be daylight, it could be nighttime, and just run home because they don't want to be around when something happens. Not telling me if, but they just know something's going to happen.
Wow.
I've seen them in the meetings before for one of the neighborhood meetings, and that was one of the things that when we talk about the integration and settling into the different demographic in your neighborhood, they were running because to them it's a beautiful area, but they hear so much that they're like, oh, I don't want to mess around. I'm running my ass home. And so I was explaining to them that I said, but the thing is I understand that's what you're going through mentally. I said, but you may not realize that people can see that and they internalize that as you not wanting to be here. And so you can't be upset with them if you all of a sudden if you have an issue going on and you want to resort to them or speak to them. I said they're going to look at you and probably ignore you because people have nothing to do except watch you.
Right. And then they're feeling your energy.
Right. And so I'm like, and so they sense that you're uncomfortable. And and so things like that are relatively it's easy for them to see that because they've been there so long. But when you're but at the same time, when you're unfamiliar with that area and you come in and you might have the most positive intentions in the world, but it's how it's received because it's not always how what our intent is, it's how people receive it. So I was always telling people like when some people will walk down the street, they'll see like the I'll call him the free alcohol taking guy, the drunk. And he'll be at the corner. He's there all day, all night. If you just walk past him and just say, "Hey, how you doing?" He's not going to bother you. He's just going to speak back to you because he's used to people looking at him a certain way and not seeing him as human. And now you've acknowledged him and he's going to look at you in a different regard now. Because like I said, nobody likes to be ignored. So just acknowledging people. And when you were explaining that issue that you were having on the phone, I knew that your intent is really clear. Like anybody with eyes, even Stevie Wonder, could see that there's no malice in you. Right. So that would be the thing. It was just that they just didn't know you. Right. And so like usually when people are it'll look like they're overcompensating to them.
Right.
So
yes.
Like, so like what the fuck? Yeah, they just give you the side eye. But just walking down the street and if there's two, I'd say independent pharmacists, drug dealers. On the block. I love how you said that. And you just happen to walk past them. Just speak to them. They're not gonna try and like give you anything. They'll just speak to you. Because one quick story is there was a woman on my block who had just moved here from Iowa, and I would talk to her every now and then because I met her on the subway. It turned out we live on the same block, and she was saying how she gets nervous because when she sees them in groups, she doesn't know how to act. And so I said, this is what you do. I said, just walk through. When you see them on the sidewalk, say, excuse me, and just cut through the group. I said, they're not going to snatch your purse. They're like that. I said, just do like anywhere else. And then I told her, I said, and a secret thing is when one of them is going to pass. I hate to say that, but it's true. One of the guys that's hanging out in the street, shooting drugs and selling drugs and stuff, he's going to get shot or something. I said, it's a fact of life. I said, when they do, send flowers to the mother. Oh. And then she said, why? I said, just do. She did, and that mother loved her. Those mothers and those sons are so well connected that mother made sure that those sons and his son's friends looked out for her because that was one of those things where it just shows respect, it shows concern, and it shows that you look at them as a person. People go through grief. It just shows that you're looking out for them, and it turned around to benefit her because now she has escorts to carry her from the subway to home. And
that's amazing. And this is who you are. Like that like when I met you in person, you threw a Friendsgiving. You like coordinated the entire thing, helped everyone like just bringing all the food, cooking the food, and then giving it out to everyone in the neighborhood that needed it. And it's so hard to ever explain to people who are so heads down in me, and acquisition, and they think that that's what's going to make them feel better. When in
Right,
actuality, the more you give, the
right,
more you get back. Like it
right,
is so hard for people to understand that. And this energy that you're talking about, which is of the oneness, where you don't see anything but souls. Like you're
right,
actually going around as a soul yourself because you're only just seeing the soul level of everyone is a reason why like I can feel your energy like through this screen emanating, which is one of just pure love. And like we can't begin to create peace and harmony in the world if we, as starting at like the community level, as you had touched upon at the city level, which you're already working on, blossoming out to the state level, to the country level, need to all be able to get back to that kind of an energy, because that's the only way that we could shift the entire world is in that kind of energy, in that kind of remembrance that you're personifying.
exactly. Then but there's two things that I always try to adapt to my everyday life and into different situations, and that is, I get triggered by things too, and so just inconsideration or ignorance or bullies. Those are the things that drive me crazy.
Yeah.
My instinct isn't. I don't want to react to them negatively. So I've integrated this belief system that I call the weight system, which is WAIT, and that means to ask myself, why am I tripping? So whenever I get like,
I love
so whenever
like where's he
something
going
kind
with
of
that?
bothers,
That's so good.
yeah, like, so whenever something seems to rub me the wrong way and kind of makes me get emotionally involved, I always say, so wait, why am I tripping to this? And then it forces me to figure out that it's nothing to do with them. It's
Right.
something that I haven't gotten over, or it's something that I have an issue with that I need to sort out before I start trying to like look at other people as being a problem. So that was the first one. And then I tend to have really deep conversations with anybody, strangers, blah, blah, blah. And some people get flared up emotionally about it. Some people don't. Some people might want to stop talking to me. I mean, it's like, and so I had to start integrating another system, and it's the think system, the THINK system. And what that means is if I'm going to get involved emotionally or physically in a conversation, it's got to have five components to it. It has to be truthful, it has to be helpful, it has to be inspiring, it has to be nurturing, and it has to be kind. So if I'm going to have that conversation, and if I'm going to say something or talk about Trump, for example, I'm only going to say stuff that's true. I'm
Right.
not. I'm not gonna just go into how much I don't like him. It'll be more about, okay, this is literally the truth. You can look this up. It's irrefutable. Helpful. It's got to be something that either helpful for me or helpful for them.
Right.
So if it's something like somebody was telling me that as an example, somebody was saying that Trump was like the first president who was sworn in that openly supported gay marriage. And so I was like, really? And so I looked into it, and sure enough, he was. Now, he wasn't the first one that openly supported gay marriage, but he was the first one to be sworn in supporting gay marriage.
Actually
So I was like, I said, that's a redeeming quality for him. I said,
yeah.
that's good for him.
Yeah.
And Eric, because that was helpful for me to learn. I didn't know that. Inspiring, where it has to be able to invoke hope, or it has to be able to something that has a bridge to get to a better side. And nurturing, it's got to be from a place of, I'm really concerned for this, or this is how I feel it might be able to benefit you. And kind from the aspect of no name calling, no slamming down stuff, no slamming doors, like none of that. Like we're just gonna sit and we're gonna have this conversation from a decent human place. And so just instituting those or integrating those has only strengthened that communication with other people, because now
Oh, beautiful.
I force myself to understand why am I reacting to it, and then it makes me have to learn what the issues where it stems from. And with the think system, it kind of forces me to only have meaningful conversations. So it's like
Right.
so everything is from.
Amazing.
Yep.
That's amazing. And it is so true that anything outside of that, it's kind of like, well, what am I really doing this for? You know,
Right.
is there like a part of me that I'm still trying to fill up? Like there's something that's like empty, and you know, we don't really realize that, so many folks are going around, feeling so much pain, and that really is the reason why they try to interact the way that they do. And it kind of like brings us back to, where you think the new earth, is going to come from. If I had to ask you like what the vision of the new earth would be for you, what would you say that would be?
I would say that it's something that the groundwork is already being laid. We might not necessarily see it with our plain eyes. I think that the elements that need to be in place for that new world, or that new promise, or that new beginning to even manifest itself, is a seed that's developing in everybody that is that it's kind of like the younger people behind us now are really showing promise as to how they see things. They don't place value on money as much
Right,
now. They
right,
place more money on experiences.
right.
And so like that, as well as the willingness to communicate and commingle with people. Like a lot of the like so many people have a problem with the whole the acronyms, the cis this and the non-binary that, and people have a lot of issues with those. I'm like, they're just finding a way to accept everybody. I said, so essentially there's a term that goes for everybody, and they're open to all of them. Like you've never seen a person who's non-binary have an issue with somebody that's not.
Right, right. No,
It's
that's
always the other
true.
side against
Right.
them. And so all of those things are groundworks are being laid to manifest itself into the other side of something. Now, on a cosmic level, the age of Aquarius, which we're sitting in now, it's set
Woo!
to
Finally, we finally
well,
made it.
but it's set to end shortly after this administration. So there's a strong belief, and this is my belief, that we're going to go through some turbulent times, because during those turbulent times, the people who really want to progress things forward are trying to get their plans together. The future leaders of this country are going to be so young. And I kept telling everybody, I said, watch, on the other side of Trump, it's going to be probably a 40-year-old president, or like a 35-year-old
Totally,
president. Right?
totally.
Because and that group are going to be the people who want to try something new. They're going to introduce new ideas and innovative ways of thinking with things, because every other country is already doing it.
Right,
Their
right,
leaders are so young. And so
right.
I was like, yeah, it's kind of pointing in that direction, because that's going to be the thing that's going to help usher it there. So I think that like just us talking about those stories and showing authentically who we are, and having those open situations for dialogue is going to be the food that those younger people feed off of when they make those decisions as to how we progress forward. I might not be here to see it. If I am, I might be 200, so I won't be able to do too much. I won't be able to get too involved. But I do think that it's gonna socially, everything's gonna start being reprogrammed back to start.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah.
at one point there had to have been only one religion. So
It's
like, I mean,
true.
like if you go back far enough, and so I think people are finding out that there's ultimately more common and differences. I think that unfortunately, a lot of the regimented minds that are behind the separatism and the othering, we have to wait till they're no longer here, because they're going to always offer resistance to progression. So I think it's going to be up to this new generation to really understand and take into consideration everybody and how to benefit the collective, and let that be part of their plan when they move forward. And I think that they're in the process of doing that now.
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
see it. I
Yep,
see
I
it.
see
And
it too.
I feel like you won't be 200. Like I feel like they'll be like, I don't think it's gonna take that long.
Oh, I'm a quarter of the way there. So like,
No, but what you're saying with the younger generation, like it feels like these kids are coming in already pre-programmed,
right,
remembering who we've always been,
right,
and that's the beauty of them being able to kind of be like that guiding light for some of the folks that are in our generation that are still feeling lost,
right.
and I feel like those folks are they're so tired and they're so burnt out from living a life. This kind of like takes us back to the beginning of the conversation that doesn't feel right to them. They don't really know what it is that they should be doing going forward,
Exactly.
and there are many of them that are curious and want to know, and will learn from the younger generations and want to kind of shift into a newer way of being. And I think that we're going to see that sooner than you think. But then I think there's a lot of people who will never do that.
Yeah.
And that's why I do this podcast, because I feel like, that's okay. If they're going to be in kind of like the old earth, what we'll call it, I continuously hear that there's the creation of the new earth that actually splits off, where all of these folks that are interested in a new way of being combined with the younger generation start to live in a higher frequency,
Right.
right? Which is where we are manifesting, and
Exactly.
we are empowered co-creators to say, well, this is the kind of systems that are supportive of what it is that we now want to be, and we can roll up our sleeves and make them together, right? And this is why, like, we breathe these conversations into life, because we're doing that. But I continuously hear also that in that high vibrational frequency, that the old earth with all of the other folks that are staying in the low frequency just simply will not be a vibrational match,
Right.
because they kind of like deflect off
Right.
of that, of that frequency. It just doesn't match. And so at some point, while we're seeing the shift in the higher frequency, we're watching it from the new earth, we're seeing like that older way of being still be there, it eventually becomes smaller, right? And it eventually shifts away. But my feeling is that it'll happen a lot sooner than you think.
Yeah, like it's one of those what to say, it's kind of like the progression of like, or the renovation of like one of the tunnels that goes from here to Jersey. Like it's always been there. Slowly but surely it's being
Right.
it's being
Right.
there's progression. It's being
Right.
built, it's being fixed.
Right.
We don't necessarily see it, but eventually you'll be able to realize that the road's no longer bumpy, that
Yes.
everything moves
Yes.
along a lot smoother.
Yes.
And so I'm like, life has more in common with the Holland Tunnel than we realize. And so like just
Bumper sticker. That's like,
like just looking at it from a
that's so funny.
standpoint, it's just we're just in a period of this of under construction, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's going to get to the other side, and when it does, it'll be worth everything. All the ugliness that we went through, it'll be worth
Yeah.
it. And there's always going to be like a opposition to something that's positive. Everybody loves Disney cartoons, but they wouldn't be who they were if it weren't for the villains. So I mean,
Right.
it's like
Right. That's the whole thing. Like, that's why we chose to come here now,
right, yep.
because we were like, we want to be here during the mess. We like us some big challenges and some extreme traumas to have gotten over, while at the same time, transforming into a new way of being, and talking to other people on how to do it.
Well, one of the last things my grandmother always said was that she said when things kind of bother you like that, she said, baby, just look at it like sandpaper. It's going to rub you the wrong way. It's going to irritate the hell out of you. But by the time you get done, you'll be smooth and polished, and that's just going to be useless. so like, I'm just like, okay. And so I just like take that same approach, and that like, something that's going to rub you the wrong way and just irritate the hell out of you.
Yeah.
But when you use it for you, instead of using it, looking at it as something that's against you, it can only make you more polished and
Yes, that's so beautifully said, and that's kind of like the fun of this journey. So thank you so much. It
You're
has
most
been
welcome.
an unbelievable joy to listen to your words. I could listen to you speak all day.
Likewise.
And
It was a pleasure to see you.
we must do this again. We must
Yep.
have a follow-up. Just outstanding. Thank you so
No
much.
problem. No problem.
Much love to you.
You have to come to the next meaningful conversations. I'm
Yes.
from Staten Island myself.
I want to be there. I want to be in. Thank you. Thank
No
you so much,
problem.
my love.
You're very welcome.